So this is our last session this morning, or this afternoon. And I'm going to introduce each one of the speakers. We have Sharon Jaroch, University of South Florida graduate and licensed professional engineer from Tampa. After working several years for Texas Instruments and Northrop Grumman, Sharon followed her passion into politics. In 2010, she co-founded No Tax for Tracks in Hillsborough County, which eventually led to her board appointment to the local transit agency, HART, where she served for 6 years. She currently works with grassroots in Florida and Alabama for Heritage Action, the advocacy group of Heritage Foundation. And in the middle, we have Sharon Calvert, is currently a conservative blogger for EyeOnTampaBay.com. She has served on the Hillsborough County Citizens Advisory Council and Charter Review Board. She's been actively engaged in the transportation issue in Tampa Bay over the last decade. Sharon is a citizen advocate for good governance who championed getting the financial impact statement now required on all Hillsborough County local ballot initiatives passed in 2012. And then we have Dr. Jim Davison. Dr. Davison has lived in the New Tampa section of Hillsborough County for 25 years, and he was a co-founder and president of the New Tampa Transportation Task Force, represented the city of Tampa on the Transportation Committee in '99. He received appointments to the County Citizens Advisory Committee, Indigent County Health Care Board, and Emergency Medical Planning Council. He has been involved with local transportation efforts for over 20 years and recently assisted in the county's $600 million transportation program financed by annual increasing ad valorem revenues. He recently offered a $12.7 billion transportation revenue plan that does not raise taxes and whose revenues were validated by the county administration. So with that, let's start.
Okay, thank you all for staying this late. I know it's getting a little bit wearing, but I think this session we're going to talk about some local issues and how you can get involved. And so glad we have the turnouts because we're going to need a lot of help in the coming months. But I'm going to talk about bring some of this into the local level. As you all probably know, we have now 3 local transit agencies, HART, which I served on, and then we have the PSTA and newly formed or reconfigured TBARTA. So Randall talked a lot about actually many of our speakers talked about the declining ridership. And I went back and just charted the last few years. Actually, this is ever since I was on the board, the last 6 or so years that I was on the board. And the blue bars represent the increase in service hours per year. So you can see we steadily, year after year, have been adding service to the HART area. But look what's happened to ridership. It's tanking, and a lot of that is due to what Chris just mentioned and several other speakers about the disruption that's going on in transit. And this is why they're predicting that we're going to be having some zombie agencies. So PSTA is roughly the same. Their increase in service hours is not as large, but it is increasing every year. And then you can see they're showing a similar pattern, and this is nationwide. That's just what we're seeing at HART. When I got on the HART board, we have something called the Transit Development Plan, which is basically our 10-year plan. And I got in 2011, and we had just defeated the light rail tax, and they had put together a really good Plan B. Ruth talked about Plan B, and he also talked about putting in what we termed at the time Metro Rapids. These are bus rapid transit systems that actually work in the highway. We were able to build one out, and it has all the elements that he discussed. It had fare vending machines at the station, it had the raised platform, it had transit signal priority. So actually, if you're behind one of these Metro Rapid buses, that's great because if they're running late, they can make the green light. They have a little button, a transmitter, that will keep the light green. And so it would actually be to your benefit to follow one of those. Unfortunately, I left last year, and this was the first year that they decided to pull out that network. And so it'll be interesting with all the efforts that Sharon's going to talk about where they're headed. So anyhow, that's the HART and the PSTA. Now T-BARDA, one of the things we fought, starting in 2011 when I got on there, was this push to try and merge HART and PSTA. And they tried twice. They went to the legislator, a certain powerful state senator, that is unnamed. That's the one running for governor, if I can show you this. I could say more, but I won't. He forced us to do studies on merging, and the first one we had to come up, we had to actually pay for something we were trying to stop, $200,000. And the second time it was $100,000. I guess the legislature had kicked in that amount. And so finally, when those didn't work, they finally got their way and they took an existing agency, T-BARDA, and repurposed it. You can see in red it says Transit Authority. It used to say Transportation Authority. And they would do a master plan. They were around since 2009. And their master plan for the Tampa Bay area had, believe it or not, 350 miles of rail. Rail here, rail there, rail everywhere. So now they're just coming clean, and it was reconfigured, and anyhow they're headed towards I won't say anything. We'll just leave it at that. I think it's not going to be good. So why are these efforts to do all this? And so to answer that question, you got to kind of look, and you got to oops, I guess that slide. I thought I had a slide in here. Who benefits? Well, let me go back here. I'll go here. Who benefits? You typically see the same rail cartel, and these are just a few of the typical players that you see. Of course, you have the urban planners who have this utopian dream of how things are going to be, and they're urbanist, sycophants that follow their philosophy. Then you have developers, and developers are seeking waivers of impact fees. When they build new developments, typically there's an impact to the road, and it used to be that you would pay an impact fee. They're also seeking subsidies, and I'm gonna go that direction just a little bit to give you a little example and maybe tie into what John Charles was talking about with transit-oriented development and why these renewed year after year pushes for rail, even though we say no, no, no. And it was good to bring Brightline in here because, it is costly to build these systems. So it's rare that you find a private company willing to do it. But they think they have a business model to do it, and they're willing to risk their own money. But typically, these rail systems are much more expensive when buses are a much cheaper way to move people, if it is truly mobility that they're after. But they're not after mobility. They're after what's in it for me and how can I benefit from the taxpayer trough. You have financial institutions involved. When we built the Metro Rapid that I told you earlier, that was rare. It was actually funded by the county and no federal grant was involved. But what they did is they appropriated $32 million like 5 years prior to when we even started it, and they set it in a bank. So who do you think's earning interest? And so a lot of these financial institutions, they're going to be doing a lot of financial transactions that benefit them. So that's that. Engineering firms, I'll tell you what, it's a cottage industry here with study after study after study after study by these engineering firms, and they always come up with the same thing. It's like, do we really need another study? And then of course the politicians, if you follow their campaign donations, they benefit greatly, and plus when they have the ribbon cutting ceremony, they get their face plastered all over the paper. So that's who benefits. Let's take a look at T-BARDA with its new name here now, Transit Authority, and notice how they have here TOD Resource Guide. TOD is the Transit Oriented Development, and that's what is probably the impetus for a lot of these people. And one of the chapters, chapter 7, is funding and financing. So let's take a look. And I'll just read, it's in blue and it's kind of hard to see, but it says types of funding mechanisms. Well, let's just go here. There's 3 types: grants, loans, and bonds. Okay, that's how they finance these. Monetary contributions, grants, loans, and guarantees are funding and financing tools. However, they also, I'm going to have to move closer so I can read it. However, they can also be considered economic development tools. They become incentive mechanisms when an economic development council or local government provides the grant funding, the loan guarantee, or helps a developer to secure the financing from a private financial institution. As economic development incentives, these tools are not only encourage particular developments, but in some cases they may be the only thing that makes a project become a reality. So in other words, it's not the private, it's too risky for the private sector, so that's why they come to the taxpayer to bail them out. So that's what's kind of incentivizing these projects that otherwise the private sector wouldn't do. And transit is what enables, it unlocks this type of free money and financing. So let's take another example of this in Works. One of the tools, it tells you these are some of the tools, and I'm going to talk about this one, New Markets Tax Credit Loans. Okay, what this is if you develop an area that they deem as blighted or an opportunity zone, whatever you invest in that, you're going to get 39% return on your money. Does anybody want to buy a stock that is guaranteed to give you 39% back? I mean, yeah, we all want to get involved in that, right? So this happened locally here. You have two, I'll call them, well, I hate to use the word crony, but let's just say that they are making good use of the tools that are available. And so this is an article that was in the Times that talks about Armature Works and Eulalie. And both of these projects are along, this is the Hillsborough River here, just north of downtown Tampa, a new evolving, hotspot. And they were both able, this Armature Works and Eulalie was able to get, number one, the land at a very good deal. And number two, they were able to get subsidies. And number three, they got this New Markets Tax Credit. So whatever they put in, they got 39% back immediately. So this is why they want these types of transit projects, because these are the types of subsidies that are available for the taking. And I talked about the politicians and why they're really pushing transit. Well, this is the path that Sharon's going to talk a little bit more. It's called All for Transportation. Well, they had a little event that where they were trying to get people to help them gather petitions. And guess where they held it? They held it here at Armature Works. And oh, by the way, I was replaced on the hardboard by the developer who developed Armature Works and is actively helping get, they actually had to put that on their campaign finance, the fact that they gave them an in-kind donation. So that's kind of some of the things going on. I know we're pressed for time, but I just wanted to mention the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. This actually was initiated several years ago when I was on the HART board. And FDOT gave a grant to HART to actually do the study for them. I was told at the time, this is just a feasibility study. And to me, I'm thinking, oh, this is great. We're going to show that this, these projects are boondoggles and it doesn't make sense. They're not going to have the ridership. The costs are going to be too high. But guess what? That wasn't the intent. The feasibility is how do we get federal funds? And it more, not a study, but now it's a plan. It's automatically a plan, and the purpose of the plan is that projects have the greatest potential to be funded. So that's how they rated the plans, is what is the possibility of it to be funded, rather than which one moves the most people, which makes greater mobility for people, but it's all about competing for the federal grants. So the solution is we need to reduce the availability, the pot of free money. Unfortunately, when they passed the FAST Act in 2015, I think, it was a huge increase in the capital investment grants that go to transit. Guess what happened in the House? I believe it was the House last week. They passed a transportation reauthorization that actually gave like $1.3 billion more in these than what the FAST Act had. So, that's what's the capital that goes to seeding more and more of these projects. So the results of the study, I'll just go quickly to this one. It came to this. One is running in the shoulder of I-275 or BRT, and it's morphed into hardening the shoulder. So it's going to become maybe a fixed guideway for this BRT, which we already heard about how we just don't have the number of buses running, the frequency enough. The reason they chose that is they had to whittle it down to get under $10 per trip, which is the key to unlocking the federal funds. You've got the urbanists all up in arms, and they're trying to get this CSX urban rail going. So there's currently undergoing a fight between the urbanists and the DOT over trying to get the rail. There is a public comment period going on right now on these projects. I'm going to give you the website and the next site, but these are all the stakeholders, and these are all the different agencies. You have the stakeholder agencies, you have the business community, and then down here you have public comment. Now currently it's the urbanists that are going to that site and putting in their comments, and our site is not being represented. So you need to go to tbregionaltransit.com and fill out the survey, and you just go to that site and you click here and you can go ahead and put in your comments. So that might be a quick action item that y'all can do. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon. tbregionaltransit.com. Thank you.
It's funny that 275 bus thing.
While she's getting my few charts up, the Heart Board has never been the same since Karen's not been on there. But you can see what they do. They stack the deck of these agencies, the bureaucrats, who have a lot of power. Okay, transportation.
Speak up, Sharon.
Transportation funding hits home. When I mean home, I'm talking about your wallet. I'm going to talk just briefly from a legislative perspective. Sunrail, everybody know what Sunrail is? It's that commuter rail system in Central Florida where the fare box recovers 5 whopping percents of its operating cost. It's never met its ridership numbers. And when it was first implemented in 2014, the state agreed to pay to operate it for 7 years. So that Sunrail state funding ends in 2021. Now the interesting thing is the local municipalities don't have their funding for it yet. So this is going to be real interesting to see what happens at the local level. They'll rob Peter to pay Paul. But beginning in this past legislative session, the food fight over where that funding, those millions, will go has already begun. There was a bill that was in this past session that did not get passed. We know in this last session that the Parkland shooting happened and a lot of other stuff kind of got pushed to the side. But this is going to come back. In that bill, in this past session's bill, it earmarked T-BARTER, the agency that Karen just spoke about, the Regional Transit Agency, which is another transit agency that their wallet gets to pay for. It actually had an earmark in it for $25 million of that $60 million every single year. No sunset date. Basically, there was a requirement to do a local match, and now you know why they want another tax referendum. You get the local match, they get their money. It was really, I think, a poor policy bill, so I'm glad that I believe it's going to come back in a different way, shape, or form because Miami-Dade also got an earmark out of it. And then it came out of, if you didn't know this, we have to pay dock stamps on real estate transactions. That seems really kind of archaic today, right? But why don't we just reduce the dock stamp rate and keep that money in our own pockets at $60 million? How about that? So remember that coming up in this next legislative session, because we found that the dock stamp fund is a huge amount of money and no one knows where it all goes. Also at the legislative session this past session, kudos to our state legislators. You know, we do want to give them a high five sometimes. What they did in the appropriations bill was they added a performance audit. And the language for local referendums, which is your transportation surtax, or your infrastructure tax, like the community investment tax that built Raymond James, penny for Pinellas, penny for Pasco, those types of taxes, they're all governed by state statute. Well, they added another rule or another process, another procedure. And basically, it states that for any referendum after March 23rd of this year, a performance audit by, it's a group called APAGA, that's an acronym, but it's an audit entity out of Tallahassee who does a lot of the auditing for the state. They have to perform a performance audit and have it completed and published online 60 days prior to the election. So if you're looking at November, you're talking about having something done by September 6th. Because there are some counties that have, Broward County has put one on the ballot. I think there may be a school board or so that's put one on the ballot. And you probably saw that Hillsborough County School Board wanted to put something on the ballot, and the audit got in the way. Yay! Okay. If you read the Tampa Bay Times, you will know that there's been, well, they tried to call it a grassroots citizen petition effort. That didn't last long. But if you were approached, if you lived in Hillsborough County and got approached to sign this, it's 5 pages, this is small print, of regulations. The Citizen Initiative is a referendum to raise the sales tax from 7% to 8% in Hillsborough County, and they're doing it as they do it as a charter amendment. That means this would go into the Hillsborough County Charter. This is legislative, all regulatory, bureaucratic gobbledygook. So, what we did find out was it was not grassroots. It was actually downtown Tampa special interest who funded the PAC called All for Transportation to put this 30-year transit tax type referendum on the ballot in Hillsborough County. There was literally 5 donors. 5 donors that gave $150,000 each, $750K just on the petition drive to do, and they had to do it in 6 weeks. That petition effort, the petition drive is done. The validation will be complete within, I would say, Monday or Tuesday at the latest. But there's a few little issues, perhaps. This audit, can that audit be completed if it got certified by the supervisor of elections? Can an audit be completed by September 6th? Big question. The county commissioners have to ensure the county follows the rule of law, because there's kind of been this, I'm not responsible, you're responsible. Who's responsible? Nobody's responsible. So we're really trying to make sure that our county follows the rule of law, which is the state statute. As well as whenever you write something like this, are there any other legal issues that could be a problem? Could be. You know, that's a good question as well. So what is this thing? Well, over 30 years, no matter what you say, because the narrative on the road is it's going to be $280 million a year for 30 years, which ends up about $7-8 billion maybe. That's false. It's $280 million in the first year. And Hillsborough County population is growing so fast that our own county commissioners are having to re-estimate it almost on a yearly basis, because Hillsborough County is a growing county. So if you actually use a growth rate, it will raise $15 to $18 billion over 30 years. And again, it's putting restrictive regulations, this whole thing, for 30 years in the county charter. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but basically what it's doing is it's forcing, because it's using the brute force of regulation and bureaucracy for billions. It's about $7 to $8 billion of this would go to part. Oh, by the way, they still have an ad valorem tax that the county pays for that provides about $40 million. That's not going away on cost of transit projects, because in the regulations, they haven't specified the exact what projects. They specified the how. So they have percentages in here of that 7 or 8 billion, they are forced to spend on costly transit projects, whether you need them or not. That's what it says. In addition, the really concerning part as well is that they actually have a section limiting new lane capacity. It's a section in this, and it's constraining and limiting adding new lane capacity and new roads. Now, can you imagine Hillsborough County, where 600,000 or 800,000 people are going to be moving here in 30 years? We can't build any new roads. But it was written by the urbanist. The other thing it does is it grows the size of government. Does anybody want another transportation bureaucracy in Tampa Bay? We get another one with this. And not only do we get another bureaucracy of appointees that will be stacked by the city of Tampa, it will take a 75% super majority to change anything. So if you're looking at this wondering, is it absurd? Yes, it is. But the problem is that if it gets through some hurdles, it will be on the ballot in November. So we will be looking for help in fighting this once
Can you say what it's called again?
again. It's all for transportation is the PAC. I'm assuming that would be the campaign. And one more thing. The $750,000 that those 5 donors put in, we have heard they're willing to put in $5 to $10 million into an advocacy campaign to push it for the ballot.
We'll have questions on that.